welcome to Moments That Could Have Changed Football Forever. My name is Peter Thornton. I co-authored the book with my good friend Peter Prickett.
Hi, everyone.
And today's special guest, we have Martin Brock from the Junior Premier League. Martin, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for inviting me on.
There's been a lot on social media, rightly and wrongly, about the Junior Premier League. Just give us a quick summation of where you are, what you've done, and how you co-founded it.
Okay, long story, which I'll try to make as interesting as possible. 12 years ago in Wiltshire, where I live still, the local leagues, very well-run leagues, good grassroots football leagues, but I had a number of talented players and they just weren't getting opportunities. No scouts were coming to see them, and the games, having played the same teams season in, season out, were becoming a little bit predictable. So I went to the County FA repeatedly and asked, could we change things up? Could we do competitions a bit differently? And was repeatedly told, no, it is what it is. And after my last inquiry that I ever had with them, they said, if you don't like it, start your own league. So I went, okay, sounds like a good idea. How do I do that? Had a number of clubs interested. We started quite small with 12 clubs, some of them with just one team in the league, and toddled off to Wembley because the clubs we had involved came from 5 different counties at the time. So it got classed as a national league, and went to Wembley, sat down with 2 absolutely top gentlemen. One of them sadly no longer with us, Steve Rook, but great people. I think Steve Rook was from your neck of the woods, Pete, ex-Manchester FA, and managed to get a sanction to start. So September 2011, we started with 34 teams from 12 different clubs. And then we sit here today in England with 530 something clubs and about.
Does that make you the biggest in the country, Martin, that now?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, far in front of anyone else. The grassroots technology using whole game registrations, player registrations, I think puts us about 10 or 11,000 above anyone else.
I mean, you've done that really succinctly, but what we're talking about here is like proper pioneering. I mean, no one else had ever come anywhere near doing anything like what you'd done before, ever, had they?
Yeah, I think the success of the Junior Premier League comes down to a few things. And one, it's not accepting when you're told no. So a number of the things we've introduced in the league, when we've gone to people and said, we want to do this, they've said, no, you can't do that. And our attitude's always been, but it is best for the children. Yeah, but you can't do it. But it's best for player development. Yeah, you still can't do it because we've never done it that way. Yeah. Okay, but we're going to do it. And then normally 6 to 12 months later, okay, fine, we've allowed you to do this pilot. And look, to be fair, the National FA have been amazing. They've always given us pilots to allow us to try things. And then, with evidence behind it, they've said, fine, you can now include it in your rules. But often you get a pushback, and I think I said to someone the other day, what would you attribute the success down to? And I did say ignoring people who tell me you can't do it. And genuinely, every decision we make is this best for the player? Yeah. Okay. Well, then, we're going to do it then.
See, with the greatest respect, that was at grassroots level. That was a moment that did change football forever. It did. No, it did.
I think it's the lovely thing about our league, if you look at it, is 50% of the staff, my team, as I prefer to call them, are women. So we have not only, if you like, a more empathic side coming over or empathetic side coming over, and a holistic care element to it. So it is very what's best for the child, but 60% of the team have got a B license or above.
Wow.
So it's a very coach-based, caring team, which I think just lends itself to better decisions around.
So Peter's area is Brentford. You got teams in that you know of, Peter, in Martin's league?
I can't tell you what teams are in which league, but I know that the JPL operates around here. I think he used to be at what is Middlesex FA's headquarters.
I was there on Saturday.
There we go.
I spent the day there on Saturday. We are, again, we're always trying to do things a bit differently. So we've even designed a kind of leisure wear line of clothes for our representative team players as part of a program they participate in. So we were there at Middlesex FA watching all the young kids play. So we have under 7s up to under 10s there all day Saturday, and doing a photo shoot with some players. So never a dull day.
Loves a good kit, does Martin, don't you?
Sorry?
I say you love a good kit. You always like good apparel. You ever see Martin? He's always got top apparel on.
I think one of the other things that the JPL has always been quite mindful of is kids want to be part of something. They want to, be able to feel good about what they're doing. So we've always tried to align with good brands and make things look cool, because
it always helps, doesn't it?
Yeah. Sometimes I think we forget that the kids live in a different world to what we did when we played, grassroots football. The kids now are more interested in, can I put this on TikTok or Instagram? Rather than, I remember going home as a kid in Plymouth and having to wait 2 days for the Evening Herald to come out to see the score from all the other games in the league.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. So you said earlier you just sort of you have expanded into the States. Tell us a little bit about that and how that's going.
So just before I started the Junior Premier League, we spent a lot of time in Florida, and I did some coaching badges in the US as well. Coach soccer over there. Absolutely loved the scene in America because they have very level-based soccer. So you can start at recreation level, they have competitive level, and then they have travel, elite, ODP, whatever term they use for that particular brand. But they have very definitive, if you want to just play with your mates for fun, come and play recreational. If you want to be a bit more competitive, but you don't want to travel, competitive league play is there. And then sometimes for the very best players, or sometimes for the players that can afford it, they do have some really, really cool national based leagues. And I think that always excited me when I watched that kind of soccer, because I thought, okay, you are giving kids opportunities here. And when I came back to England, it was, okay, can the JPL mimic that? Can we be that bridge between grassroots and pro academy football, and be, if you like, that competitive level? So naturally then, when the JPL had grown to a size, I was like, okay, can I now take my concept of JPL football back to America and, mimic what we've did in England in America, but just very player development focused.
Slotted in quite nicely, I would have thought.
Yeah, we've gone a different area of country. So America is a little bit different. They don't have just one sanctioning body. They've got loads. And we've partnered with US Club Soccer, who are absolutely superb. I mean, the level of support they give you is unreal. They are so invested in how they treat their own players. So they get involved on quite a granular level in terms of, okay, you're a league, you have a sanction and you're operating, but we want to make sure that the players are looked after. There's a lot of care that goes into soccer over there from them as a sanctioning body. And we're covering 7 states now.
Wow.
So, yeah, it presents a challenge because you can't play soccer in Montana pretty much from November through to mid-March, maybe early April, because it just is under inches and inches of snow. But then you see some of the indoor facilities they're building, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It does. I have to say, it does bring us nicely to the chapter that you want to talk about first, which is what if soccer had become the national sport of America? You've seen the grassroots level at first hand. What made you pick that chapter anyway? Was it that interest? Was it that link?
So, for as much as what you put in, to also what you didn't put in, if you like, for me.
Yeah.
So I think from the point of view of a coach, I have said it so many times, and I said it at our first league event that we held in Salt Lake City in July. The natural athletic ability of some of our players is just astounding. And you go, wow, if you ever got this right as a nation, and I so often say this when I'm in the US, if you ever really had that kind of soccer culture similar to we have as our football culture, you'd be untouchable, because the facilities that we're renting to put our events on are literally breathtaking. The next event we're holding in America is in Arizona just before Christmas, and you just can't believe it. You know, we would never see something like that built in England. It is 24 4G pitches in a row with electronic scoreboards. You know, everything that you could possibly need there is unbelievable. So you see the facilities, you see the coaching is really good. They've embraced all of the athleticism of their culture into their training. So they are very big on the whole speed, agility, quickness, if you like, part of soccer. They then really, really embrace, you know, multiple training per week without it affecting schoolwork. So there's lots of programs to help them with their homework, schoolwork, and play soccer and be an athlete. And they're big on student athlete.
Yeah.
So you think, wow, if you somehow manage to make this, you know, America's national pastime to take over a baseball, or, you know, the national obsession to take over, you know, NFL football, you know, it worries me.
There's a limit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Have you ever fancied coaching over there, Peter?
No, going to cut it short. Absolutely not. Because maybe it's my own biases, but I just didn't fancy going there because of the approach to the game. All the things that Martin has spoken about as being what they embrace, what they seem to not embrace is play and fun. And I might be being very harsh, but I've spoken to a number of people who work out there, and it seems the structure is very structured, the regimentation very regimented, and therefore the enjoyment factor disappears very, very early. So I do wonder about even if it was the number one sport and the best athletes were playing, the best physical specimens were playing, would they have the creativity, imagination, game understanding of a play-based, and where play is so integrated in their culture? Would it be there? And that's what's stopped me from fancying going. But then I guess that is the question: what if it was the number one?
Yeah. Do you think that's the culture of the nation, you two, or do you think it's like the sport? To me, that America, you know, they start off having to win at a very early it's a very early concept, isn't it? Winning in America.
I think if you look at even the Ryder Cup this weekend, I mean,
Yeah.
I heard all the old tropes, pulled out again of, they didn't maybe get the team dynamic. It's very individual, the sport over there. And okay, they're talking about golf, and they didn't get the whole squad, almost like club feel that the Europeans had. And I think the danger in US soccer sometimes is that there is quite an individual basis. It is very, very kind of me focused. So sometimes maybe they don't get the bigger team dynamic. But I think the biggest barrier currently in soccer in America is that it is incredibly middle class. It is dominated by a paid to play philosophy. The one counterbalance I'll put to that is a number of the teams in our league in America are very, kind of South American, Latin American dominated, and their culture around the match is very, very different. You can see when you have a kind of Hispanic based team,
that's your creativity, I guess, is it?
Yeah. And that's where you think this melting pot of cultures that the USA is, if you could really embrace it all, so you maybe have the the structure, the discipline of maybe European based teams allied with that kind of South American, Latin American creativity. Wow, you could have something special. And it's strange when you look at the women who are so dominant or have been.
I was just about to say,
that how come the women got there and the men didn't? And that for me is the most fascinating part. The chapter in your book was amazing, because I'll be honest, until I read it, I had no idea of that history. For me,
I think that was one of the interesting things about what you said at junior level, where there's lots of different governing bodies, which was basically why football in America didn't grasp that chance it had in the 30s, because they were squabbling about which was the America's Cup, which league was the dominant one. And it seems to me it still is, I think, Peter, and it's very much on the West Coast and the East Coast. That's how they organise all the sport, isn't it? Because there's not a right lot in the middle, I guess.
Well, I was looking at a map actually, which was really of the basketball conferences, and the West starts very, very close to the center of the actual middle, of geographical middle, and the South actually starts really quite high up, and the North is very small but very populous. So the true geography of what they call the East Coast, the West Coast, the Midwest, Mid-South isn't actually reflected. It's a little bit like having Israel play in UEFA and Australia play in Asia. It's not a true reflection of the real geography of the United States.
I mean, I think you got to. You look at the sheer size of America, and you do get that trying to control leagues and run leagues, especially like in 1930s, when you're talking about post telegrams and how hard that must have been to try and coordinate it all, knowing what we do now, you can understand how it, the obstacles they had to overcome, but they seem to overcome them, and in the other sports, as we wrote in the book. There's that seminal moment when I forget, in the middle of the 30s, when 40 people are killed playing American football, and you think, surely soccer, that had to be the time, didn't it? That had to be the time.
The other sports really struggled a bit too. Baseball didn't. Baseball was pretty well organized, but the basketball didn't become what we see it as until the 1980s. Anyone who's watched the Last Dance documentary hopefully will remember near the beginning, where they talk about the Chicago Bulls in the late 70s and early 80s. more people were going to watch the indoor soccer team than the Chicago Bulls basketball team. So the NBA struggled. It had to merge with the ABA, and it had to have this really the emergence of superstar players who managed to capture the attention for it to become what it is now. The NBA being massive is actually a relatively recent thing. So not all of the sports in the States really got going immediately. And Super Bowl wasn't until the mid-60s.
Yeah, no, that's true.
When you were saying that, I thought moments that could have changed sport forever would have been, Nike actually coming up with Air Jordan and sponsoring Michael Jordan for the amount
next
they
book.
There you go. Sorry, I'm stealing it. But Peter's right. It's it was Nike's emergence into basketball with Michael Jordan. Was that the catalyst that then pushed the NBA on? The same as, let's be honest, the Premier League starting injected the money into, football. So
I think we forget as well, how long ago that. Well, it's not that we forget; it's just to us, the 80s, certainly to me, doesn't seem that long ago. I can vividly remember everything that happened, but it's actually nearly 50 years ago. Well, 50 years ago from when I started watching football was like 1910. So that sort of perspective of basketball only took off in the 80s. It did, but it's the longevity of that game within that time frame, isn't it? That is quite surprising, and how it's sort of taken off. The one question I've got for you then, Martin, do you agree with what we sort of came up with in the book that, if America had soccer as its number one sport, they'd probably have won, 3-4 World Cups by now?
I think they would be super dominant for sure.
Like the women, you see
definitely. I think, but the culture would just so systematically have to have changed over there for them to. I think the women they dominated in at first because almost their college program soccer, if you like, gave them such a big head start on most countries. I think the next decade will be really interesting in terms of women's soccer, football.
Yeah, level up, I think.
Yeah, because I know even speaking to, the Lionesses and the younger youth teams, we've started beating America at youth team level now.
Yep.
And, we never used to get close. But actually the levels of our girls in England has just gone up so much.
But we're getting the athletic girls early, like they clearly got all the athletic girls, didn't they, early? Yeah. They weren't going to play other sports because girls weren't particularly welcome in other sports in America. And in soccer, they were straight away.
But also, they do just, the average good soccer player, female in America, will be training at least 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And now the best girls in England are training at least 2 times a week, normally 3. So I think that will level up. And that's the only thing that stops me from saying confidently they would have won more, because I wonder if the American women will find that they don't win much for a little while now as well, because I think the rest of the world's caught them up. But I think they would have been dominant for sure, and largely down to money, which they would have been able to inject into it.
Is it quite similar to the head start that the English male game had over the rest of the world, in that we were organised and training regularly and professional far earlier than anyone else? So if there had been a World Cup in 1910, England would have won. And indeed, the equivalent back then was the Olympics. The Olympics was the World Cup, and Team GB was dominant early on. So it's a similar sort of head start that after a period of time, eventually everyone else caught up. I think that's what's happening with the US.
You could say the turn of the last century, the World Cup was basically the home internationals, wasn't it? England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales was probably the World Cup. In 1910, as you said, that was probably it. They were probably the best 4 teams.
Honestly, what Peter's just said there, when I, a few years ago, saw that stat of Olympic gold medals for football and realised that we'd won quite a few of them, I was like, man, I never knew that. And that's when you look at it and think, if we had embraced a World Cup, and again, moments that could have changed football forever, if we'd embraced a European Cup, sooner, would Real Madrid have won the first 6?
Exactly. Yeah.
Would Uruguay have won the World Cup? Do you know what I mean? It's a shame sometimes that we kind of had this "we'll come late to the party" attitude.
Is that a little bit like the criticism that is thrown at American sports, that the world champions are the champions of the USA? I know that some of that it's called the World Series because there was a magazine or newspaper called The World who sponsored it. They're not really considered the world champions, but then in the basketball, in the NBA, they do say you're world champions at the end of it. So is that a similar issue that back in the early days of the Football World Cup, the English, we thought we don't need to enter these things because we know we're the best. And it's the same scenario kind of played out.
Well, I think it was the mighty Magyars that kind of schooled us a little bit on that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because up until then, we really hadn't lost a lot, and then all of a sudden, and they come and schooled us on how to do it. Having said that, as we were talking about USA, I did remember that was it a few years before the mighty Magyars, the US beat us in the World Cup.
Yeah, almost had a proper team. Yeah. Well, that seems to be a very good place to call it half time.
What if Brian Clough had managed England?
What if Ronaldo and Messi had played together?
What if Pep Guardiola managed in League 2?
These are just some of the things discussed in a brand new book, Moments That Could Have Changed Football Forever. Every what if moment in the book has been chosen to spark debate. Buy your copy now online at Amazon or Waterstones.
Okay, so welcome back to the second half of Moments That Could Have Changed Football Forever. I'm here with Peter Prickett and our special guest, Martin Brock of the Junior Premier League. And in the second half of the show, Martin, you want to talk about what if English teams had not been banned from Europe, which is an absolute belter. Why did you pick that one?
Primarily because I was 11 when Heysel occurred, and hands up, I'm a Liverpool fan, and it was a shocking event. The aftermath of it, with all the deaths, heartbreakingly, just awful. But then a few years ago, reading a book, I read that the Liverpool safety officials recommended, and Juve's safety officials recommended, that the game not be played at Heysel Stadium. They said it was just a health and safety nightmare. And you go back to, I can't and never will defend football hooliganism. It is indefensible. But you kind of go back and think, okay, so the game shouldn't have been played there. As a result of that game being played there, people died. And then English teams got banned. And what you wrote in the chapter echoed with me so much of how much we were affected as a nation. But also how many of our clubs, like you said, got put back a decade longer. Who knows? Yep. You look at George Graham's Arsenal team, and I always thought, that surprising statistic that Arsenal haven't won a European Cup.
Yes.
Champions League, whatever we want to call it now. But, they've not won the big one. And Everton haven't. And you look at that Everton team in the mid to late 80s, and you think, I kind of always think Liverpool would have won another one.
Yeah, well, that was our conclusion, wasn't it, Peter? That
Yeah. And I would have fancied Everton and maybe Arsenal as well, or
Yeah.
we'd have had finalists, and maybe we would have embraced, the commercial aspects of the game a lot sooner, because we kind of went a little bit insular for a few years. And I remember in the 90s, the go-to football show on TV was Football Italia.
Yes.
We all love seeing James sitting there on a Saturday morning in some Italian piazza with his big ice cream and coffees and stuff. And, I think English football became so dull, if you like, with no excitement of Italian games, Spanish games, German games, all of the excitement that used to bring.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden, as a nation, we almost fixated on Serie A.
Yeah, that's true. As a non-Liverpool fan, the only non-Liverpool fan on the podcast, I thought that era and the Liverpool-Everton rivalry was one of the great rivalries. It was so good. And coming from the same city, do you think, you'd have finished up with a possible European Cup final? Everton win it one year and then Liverpool qualify the next year as champions, and then you finish up. Do you think we were far off that?
I'd like to think we'd have beaten Everton in the European Cup final, but I might be.
I don't. Do you know what? It's really, really difficult, that one, because it was a very long time until there were two teams. It was from the same city. It was Atletico and Real. Maybe 10 years ago, slightly less than that. So it was a very long time, even with the Champions League era where multiple teams could qualify. So it would have been quite the turn of events to have two teams from the same nation and the same city reaching a European Cup final at the same time. So unlikely, but they would probably both have been contenders.
Yeah, I think for certain. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Martin. The thing about European nights, where they were so exciting, because you're going back to an era when it wasn't quite, you had to wait for the results, but you didn't get the coverage that you do now, the saturation, did you? And when you actually got to see these players, in the flesh, it really was like, wowza, it was, though, and everyone talks about the great atmosphere at Anfield for those nights, and it is, Anfield always raises its game on those European nights. That's when you see it in full flow, I'd say. Would you agree with that, both of you?
Yeah, I don't think you can beat Saturday afternoon football is, sacred, and I love it, and it's got that special place in my heart, but there is just something special about a game under lights in an evening. The European nature of, you kind of don't know what to expect. You think, oh, we're playing a Spanish team, they're going to play like this, or we're playing an Italian team, it's going to have this style of play, and you don't really know what to expect. And you just, you can't beat that excitement. You really can't. And Pete, as a Man City fan, and I'm amazed that you haven't mentioned that yet, or you're assuming most people know. So the current holders of the Champions League, it's just a special competition, isn't it? And I think that English teams were out of it. I also kind of think it devalued the European competitions for a few years, or maybe that's just an English point of view, but I don't know. I wasn't that interested.
Well, you
in
look
it
at
for
the English you lolook at the English track record before that. Our record in Europe up to that, we dominated, didn't we? I mean, unequivocally. And one of the conclusions we came to, thanks to my good friend's research here, was that the one that Liverpool did suffer more than any other club. You have a look at the number of times Liverpool would have qualified as champions and the chances of them winning. You said, oh, we might have won one. I think we said we'd probably win a couple, didn't we? We came to the conclusion they'd probably win a couple.
What we'd have got and it was something that I campaigned for in our fantasy matchups, and we decided against it eventually, but it could still be that. What we could have got was the great Beasley, Barnes, Aldridge Liverpool team facing Rijkaard, Van Basten, and
AC Milan. That was the one, yeah.
Those two teams coming up against each other, and that would have been a treat for everyone, technically, tactically. But we didn't get that. By the time Liverpool were back in, that team had been dismantled. Graham Souness was there, and I think only Beardsley, I think only Barnes was there. They'd gone. So we didn't get to see that, and that would have been, I think, something terrific.
Was the next Liverpool European trophy the 2005?
Yeah.
No, it was the UEFA Cup.
2000.
Alaves.
Yeah, Alaves. Yeah.
So it's like 10 years, isn't it? 10 years.
But the other thing that your chapter struck me on in the book was when you mentioned kind of the trio of, Dutch superstars that graced AC Milan. I did think to myself, how many of those superstars that went and graced the Madrids, the Barcelonas, the Serie A, how many would have come to England and actually upped our levels in England and helped us see these great players every week? But they were never going to come because we weren't in Europe.
Yep, absolutely.
It's really difficult, that one, because although there wasn't a massive influx of players, there was the odd one dotted around, the odd big name. Continuing with Liverpool, Laudrup almost came to Liverpool. So they were on the cusp of making those sort of signings, and whether it would have exploded slightly earlier than waiting for a return to Europe and the Premier League, don't know.
Yeah,
it's an interesting question. I don't know if we can answer, but there may not have been the talent drain that then occurred, where Rangers were in a position to attract some of the best English talent up to Scotland. I don't think that would have happened if English teams would have been still playing in Europe.
No, that's right.
Just think of a forward line of Ian Rush and Marco van Basten. Wow.
Oh, there you go. What if? So in that chapter in the book, we finish up, the interesting one for us. I think it started from a fantasy matchup, didn't it, Peter, in the first place?
I love the Wimbledon.
Yeah. So the fantasy matchup, we were thinking about, Wimbledon playing peak Barca as a fantasy matchup, what would have happened. But then we hit upon the idea of, Wimbledon in Europe, and what a joy we believe that would have been. You agree with that, Martin, with Vinny and Fash and all those lads rampaging around?
Yeah, I loved the kind of the dreamy vision that you portrayed in the book. What just did make me laugh was I was kind of thinking, literally, the first match in Europe away from home with a European ref, half of that Wimbledon team would have been off.
I think we do one, don't we? I think it's the second time they play.
Yeah.
What we basically do is we literally put them in the draw. I forget which team we take the place, but we literally put them in the draw and follow them through. And I think it's the second game they get a couple sent off. But the way that we had it was that, when they run up against the Italians are just too streetwise for them. And they do lose a couple and, get a red card, and that costs them. But you'd have loved to have seen it, wouldn't you?
Probably not post 88 Cup final, I wouldn't. Because
try not to mention that.
But yeah, I know, but you kind of are indirectly by referring to Wimbledon. So that game still hurts. Not quite as much as last Saturday's game at the moment, but yeah, still hurts. But yeah, I think it's often interesting when you see a club that's not been in Europe either for a few seasons or before go in, and the commentators always go, they're going to have to get used to, European play now, and, you know, the different refereeing styles and standards. And I was thinking, it's the same game, you know, it's not that much different. And half of their team is European or foreign anyway. So, but it is still true. You see some of the teams in their first European games, and you think, wow, you do seem kind of a bit rabbit in the headlights. I can't see Wimbledon being like that. I just think they would have gone in and went, yeah, okay, you know, let's go smash and grab.
Get all blaster on full.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a good point, that, because you know, one of the teams I remember that seemed to embrace it, and you know, was Norwich. You remember that, Pete? Norwich went in there. Didn't Norwich beat Bayern Munich or something ridiculous?
Norwich winning at Bayern Munich. Jeremy Goss. Yeah. Speaking of returning to the hurt, a team that I think would have been really well set up for Europe and missed out was the Spurs team, the David Pleat Spurs team. Where they had Hoddle and Waddle, and Clive Allen had that immense 49 goal season. And they broke the English mould, and they played a 4-5-1, probably closer now tactically to what you call a 4-2-3-1. I think that Spurs team would have been well set up for European football. And obviously they have had a really strong European tradition, a couple of UEFA Cups. I think that Spurs team, if that had stayed together, that could have been set up to win a UEFA Cup.
That's almost a what if. Another victim. Yeah, almost a what if. If we hadn't done Hoddle, building the team around Hoddle for England, that is a good what if. That the Tottenham team
probably not being in Europe contributed to Hoddle going to Monaco.
Yeah.
And on the subject of building an England team around Hoddle, it's a conversation I've had with so many people lately, which is, should we be looking to build an England team around Foden now? The likes of your Fodens.
Well, for me, it's the two of them. Yeah, it's the two of them. To me, it's Phil and Jude, isn't it? That to me is that should be your axis. How they want to play it, but that to me should be what it should be.
Yeah.
They've got to do it this time, aren't they? Or else Gareth's going to get proper pilloried, isn't he?
I just think we've got to make our mind up. And again, this is where I think the European ban did hurt us, is we kind of lost our way in terms of what is our footballing DNA.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me to last, you know, a good decade longer than the ban. And I think now again we're at one of those pivotal times when we could really change the way we play, with having Pep, you know, in the league, and so many now good coaches in the Premier League, with the English players getting used to, you know, an ever evolving game, with the likes of Jack Grealish, Declan Rice, Jude Bellingham, Phil Foden. You're looking there going, you know, we have proper ball players now. We really do. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, because you think about the ban, and then the time England performed quite well, the next time was like 96, wasn't it? You know, although they, you know, to be fair, 1990 World Cup, but we were back in Europe, you're playing against other teams. 96, they should have won it. How old were you in 96, Martin, if you don't mind me asking? Was that the first?
96, I was 24.
All right. So the 1990 would have been like probably the big watch for you on the.
No, so the first World Cup I ever really remember was 1982, with Paolo Rossi.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I don't really remember the 86 one too well.
Hand of God.
I'm trying to blot it out, but thanks for reminding me.
What if the ref called it right?
Exactly. And I mean, Christ, that would have changed the future of football, literally. In so many different ways. 90, I remember that well, because I just met my wife, and we watched that whole summer, literally believing we were going all the way. So that's probably the most poignant one for me.
It's quite a big one for you, that one, Pete, wasn't it?
Which one? 90?
No, 96.
96. Yeah, well, 96 was that was. I mean, the first World Cup I got into was 1990, but it's sort of vague memories. And then I remember quite vividly watching Euro 92, which was obviously a fantastic tournament of football for England, with two terrible 0-0s and then scoring early and Lineker getting taken off when we needed a goal and so on. But then 1994 didn't happen for England. So, and also as a World Cup, quite a tough thing to watch because of the time differences. So yeah, 96 was massive. Massive. First one I could really watch properly. And some terrific stuff. Did it help England English teams being back in Europe is a really, really interesting question, because English teams were back in Europe, but they were largely awful. Certainly in the Champions League. However, they did win a couple of Cup Winners' Cups. So
United straight back in, weren't they?
United beat Barcelona, but then Arsenal also won a Cup Winners' Cup.
Cup Winners' Cup, yeah.
And then lost
1-0, weren't they? It was Mark Hughes with United's goal and Smithy with Arsenal's goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they did win a couple of competitions, but it's in the top competition in the Champions League, zero dent was being made.
It was a while, didn't it?
But we had started to bring foreign players in. We'd had Klinsmann by then, so there was the beginnings of a European cultural influence in our game. I mean, Bergkamp was already here as well by Euro 96. So I think just simply English football has been the beneficiary of the globalization of the game. And that, combined with the money of the Premier League, means that it becomes a location for the best of the best. That's where we've ended up. And that's part of the reason why we are competitive, but also give credit where it was due. They saw that they, being the FA, saw that there were holes in what was going on developmentally and took steps towards it. With the Premier League's help, of course, because given that the FA have zero control over what goes on with the Premier League clubs, as they waived those rights in 1991, 1992, whenever it was signed, the Premier League has played a big part in helping to enforce the changes.
Do you think it is the Champions League and the playing in Europe and the glamour and glitter of the Champions League that will always override our friends in Saudi? You know, this drain that you see now of players being offered the sun, the moon and the stars to go and play. Do you think it will always, the glamour of the Champions League will always override that? Or do you think we'll see something happen?
I think... For me, for Saudi, I mean, we the Junior Premier League now has leagues in the Middle East as well. So, yeah, we're out there a lot. But, yeah, for me, the best players are still going to want to play Premier League. Your big clubs in Europe, because they want to be in the Champions League. They want the lifestyle, the glitz, the glamour that brings. I don't think Saudi Arabia, and don't get me wrong, they're rebuilding the country and it looks absolutely amazing. But yeah, it's not going to hold that same glamour, glitz, to go and play, even in a kind of Middle Eastern version of the Champions League. You can't. I don't think you can ever replace Bayern Munich versus Manchester United, Liverpool versus Real Madrid. You know, that's 50, 60 years of football history to create that glamour. you can't throw money at it and recreate it. And I was reading recently that the Saudi FA is petitioning UEFA to be part of the Champions League, and I was like, okay,
that would be a worry. That would be a worry.
How far are we ever going to?
I think they have more chance of getting their whatever it is they're doing to the top, to the apex, by doing something different. It's a little bit like we'll take the cricket and the IPL and 2020 cricket. England came up with it, didn't get the copyright and everything secured, so it was able to be mimicked, and India really embraced it, threw the money at it, pushed it to the top, and that's now the pinnacle because it was something different to what was established. Saudi probably, if they want to have the top product in football, need to change what their football product is. I don't really know what that could be. There's lots of things that it potentially is. Well, yeah, maybe, or embracing some of the futsal rules and putting it into football, and maybe football becomes a slightly smaller pitch and 9v9 and various other things. Who knows? But I think that's probably the bigger chance of replacing what we consider the apex of the game. I just think that what there currently is too far ahead of them. And they just don't have the overall quality, because without being too disrespectful to any Saudi Arabian players who may be listening to our podcast, the quality of the players who are not the superstars is League One, maybe.
Yep.
So there's big mismatches going on, which is going to affect the audience. The audience is going to see that and go, yeah, the old Mickey Mouse Farmers League comments will come out.
Yeah. I think the worry for me will be if someone young goes, a Haaland or an Mbappe or someone like that goes to Saudi. That would, I'd start to worry about that. But I think the European Cup's got the hold on everyone. The Ballon d'Or, you're not going to win the Ballon d'Or playing in Saudi.
No.
And that's
I think at this stage, anyone who goes of that type who goes there now would essentially be binning off their reputation for their career.
Yeah, for the money. It is. Yeah.
And do you not think players are a little bit? We've seen this happen with China. We've seen it happen with Russia. I mean, who can forget the name of the team in Russia that no one could ever pronounce, who was offering stupid money? They've seen it happen before twice now, where countries have come in, thrown silly money, and then 3-4 years later, the product's gone, it's dead. It's,
we've seen it in the USA.
Yeah.
Going back a little bit, we saw it in the 70s.
Yeah.
Persuading Pele to come out of retirement with a big bag of money.
Beckenbauer, Bobby Moore.
Oh, they had the greatest players some of the greatest players of all time, certainly the greatest players of that generation. Still couldn't make it stick.
That was the NSL, wasn't it? You're talking about, yeah.
Yeah.
But can we bring back, instead of a penalty shootouts, their shootouts?
The 1v1s.
Yeah, that just looked insane.
Oh, absolutely. I think at youth football level, I actually think all penalties should be taken like that. The ice hockey penalty. I think they should all be like that.
Oh, there you go. So Peter might have just given us the next rule that we're going to try and change in the JPL. We're going to do away with penalty shootouts and we're going to go to 1v1s.
Brilliant. Well, how about that to round off what has been an absolutely fantastic podcast? Martin, thanks very much.
No, my pleasure. Honestly, my pleasure.
Thanks for coming on.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much, guys. And thanks for a great book. And Yeah, I dare say you're going to get thousands of suggestions of what to put in the next one.
Here's hoping.
Take it easy,
Cheers.
guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
What if Brian Clough had managed England?
What if Ronaldo and Messi had played together?
What if Pep Guardiola managed in League Two?
These are just some of the things discussed in a brand new book, Moments That Could Have Changed Football Forever. Every football fan has a what-if moment that they know would have brought their team glory if things had turned out differently. Every what-if moment in the book has been chosen to spark debate amongst football fans. Buy your copy now online at Amazon or Waterstones and let us know what's your favourite what-if moment in football history.